There's some pretty big changes going on today in the media landscape. It seems that the cable bundle is under pressure, and the larger scale networks are going to benefit at the expense of some of the smaller networks. And I think
what exactly do you mean?
Well, you have the cable bundle, which is buying a bundle of programming from whether it's Cablevision, Comcast, Dish, DirecTV, is coming under pressure from over-the-top alternatives, right? So you don't need to buy cable anymore. You can go to Netflix, you can go to Hulu to get programming, and because of that, you're seeing some subscribers move from the cable bundle to these over-the-top options called cord fraying. And because of that, the distributors are under pressure. They're paying a lot in programming costs. Their programming costs are rising faster than their revenues. They're giving margin dollars away to these cable networks. And because of that, they're looking to either cut some cable networks or slow the growth of their programming costs, which means in order to do that, they need to essentially take programming dollars from anybody they can, and that tends to be the smaller networks, right? So if you're Disney and you have ESPN, if you're Time Warner, you have TNT, TBS, HBO, it's tough to take margin from them. It's tough to take pricing from them. But some of the smaller networks are not in that position. So based on that, it makes sense for CBS and Viacom to get together, and they'd be a bigger network with more bargaining power.
So let's talk specifically. What can the two networks do together right away that they just cannot do right now?
Well, first off, they'll have more scale. So CBS is certainly on its own. It's the most highly rated broadcast network. They're generating a lot of incremental revenue these days from retransmission. They expect their retrans dollars to go from roughly $500 million today to $2 billion by the end of 2020. So they certainly have pricing power, and they've been taking that. Viacom has a large suite of niche networks, right? They've got MTV, which appeals to teenagers. They've got Nick, which appeals to kids. Niche networks. CBS is general entertainment mass networks. You put those together, they fit well together, and hopefully they have better negotiating power.
What does Les Moonves want?
Well, that's part of the issue. Is you have Les and Philippe. They're both very successful, great executives, and we'll have to see how who runs the pro forma company if they end up putting it together.
Is that why it seems that Les wants to have some sort of ownership stake? Because once he does, you can't move him out of the throne?
Well, there's been some speculation that he's been putting together a bid backed by somebody, we don't know, to buy out the voting control of CBS. So that was, I think, widely reported last week. And so that could be part of his, as the CEO, part of his game plan is to try to buy out that voting control.
So obviously we can't talk about Viacom without talking about the big news of Jon Stewart. So what does that mean? What does that mean for the company? Is it going to be a financial hit?
The Daily Show is an incredibly successful program for them, right? It was profitable. It's been around for 16 years. It's one of the big legs of Comedy Central, which was one of their most successful networks. I do think the Daily Show probably survives Jon Stewart's exit. I mean, I think the franchise itself. Jon Stewart, if you remember, is not the first person to host it. Craig Kilborn hosted it back in the late 90s. That being said, ratings probably do suffer as you transition from Jon Stewart, who's been there, I think, 16 years now, to somebody new.
But let's just talk about growth, because wouldn't merging slow down CBS's growth? For me, it seems like in the last few years, CBS has been like a rocket ship. Once you bolt Viacom back onto them, I don't know how they could continue to have this kind of speed growth.
Well, the hope is that both of them have better negotiating power with distributors. So they can go to distributors as a much larger company and say, hey, you can't drop me, and I want a little bit more on my affiliate fees because of my new scale.
To make a good case that they'd be better off together, what would be the roadblocks to a deal? Why might it not happen?
Well, first off, they're two completely separate companies with separate boards at this point. Obviously, they've got a shared founder in Sumner Redstone. You have some of the cultural, the management, right? You've got Philippe and Les, who might not want to work together. I'd say they both have clauses in their contract that stipulate that they are the #1 executive behind Sumner Redstone.
Well, what does Sumner want?
He hasn't told me.
What do you think?
Look, Sumner Sumner wants to maximize the value of his estate. So, there are multiple ways that he could do that. But it remains to be seen. I think he's early 90s.
So wouldn't one think maybe he wants to relinquish some control here?
Again, he hasn't mentioned that to me. So
but from your perspective as an investor, when you look at this place and think the guy who's actually pulling the strings, as you just said, is in his early 90s, is he making the best decisions?
Again, I haven't. It's tough for me to comment on the decisions he's made, given that we only see the decisions at the operating companies.